I supplied one. There is a table in your life that you have been staring at, convinced it is empty, while I have been filling it from the other side. You keep counting what is missing. You keep measuring the gaps between what you need and what you can see with your natural eyes. And all the while, behind the curtain of what is visible, I have been arranging every single element that your situation requires. Not in a rush, not in a panic, but with the careful precision of someone who has never once failed to provide for a child who belongs to me. I want you to understand something fundamental about how I operate, because the misunderstanding between us has not been about my willingness. It has been about your perception. You have been looking at provision through the lens of scarcity, and scarcity distorts everything it touches. It makes small blessings look insufficient. It makes timely arrivals feel like delays. It makes a table that is being set look like a table that has been abandoned. And I need to correct that lens before we go any further, because what I am about to unfold in your life requires a pair of eyes that can recognize supply when it arrives, even if it arrives in packaging you did not expect. What you need has already been named. I spoke it before you felt the lack. I prepared it before the shortage announced itself. And the fact that you cannot yet hold it in your hands does not mean it does not exist. It means the timing is being calibrated with a level of care that your anxious thoughts cannot comprehend right now. But I am asking you to lean into something that goes against every instinct your worry has trained you to follow. I am asking you to rest in the middle of the need. Not after the need is met, not once the bank account looks healthy and the cupboards are full and the calendar is cleared up. Right here, right in the center of the tension between what you require and what you can currently see. This kind of rest is not passive. It is not denial. It is the most active form of confidence a person can demonstrate, because it says, I know the situation, I see the numbers, I feel the pressure, and I am choosing to believe that the one who promised to provide is more reliable than the evidence my circumstances are currently presenting. Let me take you somewhere important. There is a moment that keeps replaying in your mind. It arrives without warning, usually when you are doing something ordinary, and suddenly the weight of your financial reality lands on your chest like a stone dropped from a great height. The numbers do not add up. The responsibilities keep multiplying. The expenses arrive faster than the income, and you find yourself doing that familiar math in your head, the kind of calculation that always ends with a knot in your stomach, and a question you are almost afraid to ask out loud. How is this going to work? You have run those numbers 100 times. You have turned the situation over in your mind from every possible angle, and each time you arrive at the same conclusion. It is not enough. The resources are not enough. The opportunities are not enough. The strength you have left is not enough. And in that moment of quiet desperation, when the math seems final and the deficit seems permanent, I want you to know something that changes everything. I have never once operated according to your math. My provision does not follow the rules of your calculator. It does not respect the limitations of your spreadsheet. It does not bow to the projections of your worried mind. I am the one who fed an entire nation in a desert where nothing grew. I am the one who made oil multiply in a widow's jar until every vessel in the neighborhood was overflowing. I am the one who placed coins in the mouths of fish and turned a handful of bread into a feast for thousands. And I did not do those things to show off. I did them because I am a provider by nature. It is not something I do occasionally when the circumstances are dramatic enough to catch my attention. It is who I am. It is woven into the very fabric of my character, and it extends to every single detail of your existence, including the ones you think are too small for me to notice, and the ones you think are too large for me to handle. The widow did not have to convince me that her situation was serious enough to warrant intervention. She simply poured out what she had, and I multiplied it beyond what the container could hold. And that same principle is at work in your life right now, whether you can feel it or not. You have been carrying this weight alone for too long. The pressure of making ends meet, the exhaustion of always being the one who figures it out, the invisible labor of stretching what you have beyond what it was meant to cover, making it look like everything is fine when you know the seams are showing. I have watched you do this with an ache in my heart, not because I was unable to help, but because I was waiting for you to stop long enough to let me in. You are so accustomed to solving problems on your own that you have forgotten how to receive. Your hands are so busy gripping the situation that they have no room left to open and accept what I have been holding out to you. There is a posture that provision requires, and it is not the posture of a person who has everything figured out. It is the posture of a person who has reached the end of their own resources and stands there with empty palms facing upward, not in defeat, but in readiness. That is where I meet you, not at the summit of your self-sufficiency, but at the valley of your honest need. What you need has already been named. I named your provision before the world had foundations. I wrote it into the blueprint of your days with the same intentionality I used to position the stars. And just as the stars do not worry about whether they will have enough light to shine, you do not need to worry about whether I will have enough resources to sustain you. The source you are drawing from is not a well that runs dry. It is not a river that depends on rainfall. It is a supply that originates from the same place that created everything you can see and everything you cannot see. And it has no bottom, no ceiling, no limit, and no expiration. Think about what that means for the specific situation you are facing right now. The need that seems so enormous from your perspective is being met by a source that does not measure its output. It does not ration. It does not hold back reserves for a rainy day, because from my perspective, there is never a shortage that requires rationing. There is only the question of timing, and the timing is mine to determine, not yours to demand. I know about the bills, every single one of them. The ones stacked on your kitchen counter, and the ones you have been avoiding, because looking at them makes the anxiety spike so sharply that your entire body tenses. I know about the conversations you have been dreading with creditors, the ones where you have to explain again why the payment is late, swallowing your dignity in order to buy yourself another few weeks of breathing room. I know about the way your stomach drops when an unexpected expense surfaces, how a car repair or a medical bill or a broken appliance can unravel weeks of careful planning in a single afternoon. I know about the comparison that eats at you when you see other people living with a kind of ease that feels permanently out of your reach, as if financial peace were a club you were never given membership to. And I know about the shame, the quiet, corrosive shame that whispers you should be further along by now, that you should have figured this out already, that a person your age, with your experience, with your responsibilities, should not be in this position. That shame has been speaking louder than my voice in your life, and it is time for that to change. Let me dismantle that shame right now. It does not belong to you. Financial pressure is not a reflection of your value. It is not evidence of my displeasure. It is not punishment for something you did wrong 3 years ago or 3 decades ago. Sometimes the seasons of lack exist for the same reason that fields lie fallow before the richest harvest. The soil is being prepared. The roots are going deeper. The foundation is being reinforced so that when the abundance arrives, and it will arrive, you will be strong enough to steward it without it destroying you. Because abundance without depth is dangerous. Wealth without wisdom is a trap. And I love you too much to hand you something your character is not yet ready to carry. But hear me carefully. The preparation is almost complete. What has been building beneath the surface is closer to breaking through than you realize. The discomfort you are feeling is not the discomfort of decline. It is the discomfort of expansion. Something inside you is stretching, growing, being reshaped to accommodate what is coming. And that process is never comfortable, but it is always purposeful. There are doors in your life that have been sealed shut, and you have knocked on them until your knuckles bled. You applied for the positions. You made the phone calls. You showed up with your best effort and your most hopeful face. And still the doors remained closed. And each closed door felt like a rejection, not just of your application, but of your worth. As if the universe itself was saying, you are not enough. You do not qualify. Step aside for someone more deserving. But those closed doors were not rejections. They were redirections. I was steering you away from rooms that would have held you captive, disguised as opportunities. I was protecting you from partnerships that looked profitable on the surface, but carried poison underneath. I was clearing the path so that when the right door opened, and I am telling you that the right door is closer than you think, you would walk through it unburdened by commitments that would have drained the very energy you need for what is ahead. Not every open door leads somewhere worth going. And not every closed door means you have been forgotten. Some of the most important provisions I have ever given my children came through doors they did not even know existed until the moment I swung them wide. Let me tell you about a specific kind of provision that you have been overlooking because it does not come wrapped in the packaging you expected. Protection is provision. When I shielded you from a decision that would have cost you everything, that was not obstruction. That was supply. When I allowed a deal to fall through that you had pinned all your hopes on, that was not indifference. That was me providing the one thing more valuable than the deal itself, which was preservation of the foundation on which something better would later be built. You have been so focused on the provisions you wanted that you have missed the provisions you received. The health that allowed you to keep working when the income was low. The roof that remained over your head when the payment was late. The relationships that fed your soul during the season when your account could not feed your body. The wisdom that kept you from making a desperate decision that would have compounded your difficulty tenfold. All of those are provisions. Invisible, unrecognized, uncelebrated provisions that have been sustaining you with the same reliability as food and water. And I need you to start counting them alongside the financial ones because they belong to the same inventory. There is also the provision of capacity. I have been developing something inside you during this season that money cannot purchase. The ability to manage abundance wisely. The discipline that scarcity has refined in you, teaching you to distinguish between what you want and what you actually need, between what glitters and what holds lasting value, the patience to delay gratification, the empathy that comes from knowing what it feels like to go without. These internal resources are provisions too, and they are the kind that appreciate in value over time. When the external provision arrives in full force, and it will, the internal provision I built during the lean season will determine whether the abundance blesses you or breaks you. Rich people without wisdom become slaves to their wealth. Prosperous people without discipline become prisoners of their appetites. But someone who has been through the furnace of financial pressure and emerged with their integrity intact, with their generosity undiminished, with their dependence on me deepened rather than abandoned, that person is prepared to handle abundance in a way that multiplies its impact across generations. I want to address the fear that lives beneath the financial worry, because the real issue is not the money. Money is the surface level. Underneath it is something older, something deeper. It is the fear that you will not be taken care of. The fear that at the end of the day, when all the strategies have been exhausted and all the options have been explored, you will find yourself alone with nothing. That primal terror of insufficiency that traces all the way back to a moment in your childhood when you first learned that resources could run out and safety was not guaranteed. I see that wound. I have always seen it. And I want to speak directly to the child inside you who made a vow in that moment. The vow that said, I will never let myself be vulnerable again. I will always have a backup plan. I will never fully depend on anyone because depending on people leads to disappointment. That vow was understandable. Given what you experienced, it made sense. A child who watches stability crumble learns very quickly that the safest strategy is to rely on no one but yourself. But what protected you as a child is limiting you as an adult. The armor you built to survive has become the wall that keeps provision from reaching the deepest parts of your need. That vow served you for a long time. It kept you functioning. It kept you productive. It kept you moving forward when others might have collapsed. But it has also kept you from the very thing that would bring you the deepest relief. Full surrender, complete confidence, the willingness to look at a situation that does not add up and say, I do not know how this is going to work, but I know who holds the answer, and I am choosing to rest in that knowing rather than exhaust myself trying to manufacture a solution from my own limited resources. I am not asking you to become naive. I am not asking you to ignore reality or pretend that real problems are illusions. I am asking you to expand your definition of reality to include a dimension that your natural eyes cannot access. The dimension where I have already made arrangements for your situation, where the resources are already allocated, where the answer already exists and is simply waiting for the right moment to intersect with your timeline. Let me say something about the way you pray when you are in need, because it reveals something about how you see me. You pray with clenched fists. You pray with the intensity of someone trying to convince a reluctant authority to act on their behalf. You pray as if the volume of your desperation is what determines whether I respond. And I understand why. The need feels urgent, and urgency produces intensity, and intensity feels like it should produce results. But the truth is that my response to your need was set in motion before your prayer was formed. Your prayer does not activate my willingness. My willingness already exists. Your prayer aligns your spirit with what is already happening in the invisible realm. It positions you to receive what was already being sent. So instead of praying harder, I am inviting you to pray differently. Pray with expectation instead of desperation. Pray as if you are confirming an order that has already been placed, not begging a reluctant supplier to consider your request. The shift in posture may seem subtle, but its effects in the spiritual realm are seismic. Consider the birds. I said that once, and I meant it as more than poetry. Look at how they live. They do not hoard. They do not build warehouses. They do not stay up calculating whether the seed supply will last through the end of the season, and yet they are fed. Every single one of them. Not because they have earned it through productivity, or because their songs are particularly impressive, but because I take personal responsibility for the creatures I have made. And you are infinitely more valuable to me than a sparrow. If I keep a running inventory of every bird in existence and ensure that each one finds enough to sustain its small frame, what makes you believe I would overlook the needs of a child who carries my image and bears my name? The logic does not hold. The fear you carry is based on a version of me that does not exist. The real me, the one speaking to you right now, has never lost track of a single need in your household and has no intention of starting now. I am not asking you to be irresponsible. I am not asking you to stop working or stop planning or stop using the gifts and intelligence I gave you. I am asking you to stop carrying the outcome. Do the work that is in front of you with excellence and diligence, and then release the results into my hands. Plant the seeds, water them, tend the soil. But stop standing over the garden demanding that the harvest appear on your schedule. Growth has a pace that your impatience cannot accelerate, and provision has a timing that your anxiety cannot rush. The farmer who plants in the right season and tends the crop with care does not then stand in the field shouting at the ground to produce faster. The farmer trusts the process because the farmer understands that there are forces at work beneath the surface that are invisible but undeniable. You are in a season of invisible work. The roots are spreading. The nutrients are being absorbed. The structure that will support the visible fruit is being established in places no human eye can inspect. And your job, your only job right now, is to keep tending and keep trusting. Let me tell you about something you have not noticed. In the last several seasons, even in the middle of the pressure, you have not gone under. Think about that for a moment. Really let it settle. The situation has been tight. The margins have been thin. There have been weeks where you looked at what was left and genuinely did not know how you would make it to the end. And yet, here you are, fed, clothed, sheltered, still standing. That is not because you are a financial genius who somehow made the numbers work through sheer willpower. It is because I have been working in the spaces between your efforts, filling gaps you did not even know existed, redirecting resources through channels you never anticipated, softening the hearts of people who became instruments of my provision without either of you fully realizing it. Every season where you should have gone under but did not is a testimony carved into the record of your life. Not a testimony of your cleverness, but a testimony of my faithfulness. The co-worker who covered your shift when you needed the extra day. The unexpected refund that arrived exactly when the cupboard was bare. The friend who invited you over for dinner on the exact evening when your own pantry had nothing to offer. The bill that was lower than expected for reasons that were never explained. The opportunity that surfaced through a conversation you almost did not have with a person you almost did not meet at a time you almost did not show up. None of those were coincidences. They were evidence. Living, breathing, tangible evidence that even when you could not see my hand, it was moving, silently, strategically, with a precision that would astonish you if you could see the full map of how I coordinated every element to ensure you were covered in the exact moment you needed covering. And if I have been faithful in the small provisions, what makes you think I would abandon you when the larger needs arise? The God who provided the grocery money will provide the housing. The God who covered the car repair will cover the medical bill. The God who sent a friend with a meal will send the opportunity that changes the entire trajectory of your financial future. It is all the same provider. The scale changes, but the source does not. I want to build something new in your understanding. Not a theology of wealth or a formula for prosperity, but a deep, unshakable conviction that I am intimately involved in the practical details of your daily existence. I care about the groceries on your shelf. I care about the gas in your vehicle. I care about the school supplies your children need and the medical appointment you have been postponing because the cost feels overwhelming. These are not beneath me. Nothing about your life is beneath me. The God who engineered galaxies is the same God who notices when you are running low on bread. And my response to both situations is the same: sufficiency. Complete, measured, intentional sufficiency that takes into account not just what you need right now, but what you will need in the seasons ahead. I am not a reactive God who scrambles to respond when a crisis appears. I am a God who planned the solution before the problem manifested. The provision was in motion before the bill arrived. The answer was traveling toward you before the question formed in your mind. There is a difference between provision and abundance, and I want you to understand both because I have planned both for your life. Provision is what sustains you. It is the daily bread, the manna that appears each new day, the resources that keep the household functioning and the body nourished and the basic needs covered. Provision is faithful. It does not always feel dramatic or exciting, but it is relentless. It shows up again and again, steady as the tide, dependable as the dawn, consistent as the heartbeat in your chest. And I need you to stop despising the provision just because it does not look like abundance yet. There is something profoundly ungrateful about a person who has bread on the table and complains because it is not a feast. I say that not to shame you, but to reorient you. Because despising provision is actually one of the things that delays abundance. When you cannot celebrate what you have, you signal to the spiritual realm that you are not yet ready for more. Gratitude for the small is what opens the door to the large. Abundance is what overflows. It is the season where the jars keep filling, where the harvest exceeds the capacity of the barn, where you look around and realize that not only do you have enough, you have more than enough. Enough to share. Enough to give. Enough to become a channel of blessing to others who are walking through the very season of lack that you once occupied. Abundance is approaching your life. I am not speaking in vague spiritual terms. I am speaking about tangible, material, practical overflow that will touch every area of your financial reality. But it is coming through a doorway that can only be unlocked by a particular key. And that key is the settled confidence that I am who I say I am. That I mean what I promised. That my track record of faithfulness in your past is not a fluke, but a pattern that will continue and intensify as your capacity to receive increases. Not the kind of confidence that performs certainty while the stomach churns with doubt underneath. The real kind, the kind that has been tested by empty cupboards and unanswered prayers and seasons where the only evidence of my goodness was the simple fact that you were still alive to question it. That kind of confidence is forged slowly. It cannot be borrowed from someone else's testimony or manufactured by repeating affirmations that your spirit does not believe. It grows root by root, experience by experience, as you look back at every season where the provision arrived and you say, yes, it was tight, it was uncomfortable, it was nothing like what I expected, but I did not go under. I am still here. And the one who carried me through that season is the same one who stands before me now, promising to carry me through this one. That is mature confidence, not the naive optimism of someone who has never been tested, but the battle-hardened assurance of someone who has walked through the fire and discovered that the flames did not consume them. What you need has already been named. I want to speak now about something that connects directly to your provision and that you may not have considered. Your words. The words you speak over your financial situation carry weight in the spiritual realm that you cannot measure with any instrument, but that you can absolutely feel in the atmosphere of your daily life. When the first sentence of your day is a declaration of defeat, when you tell yourself and everyone around you that things are never going to change, that the situation is hopeless, that you are destined to struggle, you are building walls with your own voice that my provision has to navigate around. I am not saying that speaking positively will magically make money appear in your account. I am saying that the posture of your inner world affects the posture of your outer reality in ways that are more connected than you realize. Your words create environments. They either create environments that welcome provision or environments that resist it. When you speak words of expectation over your finances, when you say out loud that you believe I am working on your behalf, when you refuse to let the language of defeat become the soundtrack of your days, something shifts. The atmosphere around your life becomes more receptive to the movement I am orchestrating. The doors that have been resistant begin to loosen on their hinges. The connections that have been delayed begin to accelerate toward you, not because your words have magical power, but because they reveal the condition of your confidence in me. And that confidence is the currency that activates my promises. I respond to faith the way soil responds to rain, not because the rain forces the soil to produce, but because the soil was designed to receive what the rain offers. Your confidence is the soil. My provision is the rain. When the two meet, something grows that neither could produce alone. Let me tell you what I see when I look at the road ahead of you. I see a season where the strain that has been pressing against your chest finally begins to ease. Not because the responsibilities diminish, but because the resources expand beyond what you thought possible. I see unexpected income arriving through a channel you have not yet imagined. I see a debt that has been suffocating your peace being resolved in a way that will leave you astonished at my specificity. I see relationships with people who will become partners in your provision, not because they feel sorry for you, but because I have placed a divine assignment on their lives that intersects perfectly with your need. And I see you standing in the middle of that season with tears rolling down your face. Not tears of desperation, but tears of recognition, as you finally understand that every difficult chapter was leading you to this exact moment. The struggle was not the destination. It was the corridor. And what waited at the end of the corridor was a room so spacious and so full that you will wonder why you ever doubted that I had the capacity to bring you here. But there is something I need from you between now and then. And it is not perfection or performance or some impressive display of faith that you cannot genuinely produce. What I need from you is honesty. Talk to me about the fear. Tell me about the moments when you lie in the darkness running scenarios in your head. Bring me the anger you feel about the unfairness of it all, the frustration of watching people who seem to care far less about integrity living in abundance, while you struggle to cover the basics. I can handle your anger. I can absorb your frustration without it changing a single detail of how I feel about you. What I cannot work with is distance. When you pull away from me because you are ashamed of your doubt, you remove yourself from the very proximity where provision flows most freely. I am not asking for polished prayers or composed speeches. I am asking for the raw, unedited truth of what you are feeling. Because honest desperation in my presence is infinitely more powerful than composed silence at a distance. I am your Father, and not a distant, theoretical father who occasionally sends a check in the mail and considers his obligation fulfilled. I am the kind of father who sits across the table and asks about your day, who notices when something is bothering you before you even open your mouth, who would rearrange the entire structure of creation to ensure that a single child of mine does not wonder whether there will be enough for the next day. That is the kind of provider I am. And I need you to stop relating to me as if I were a reluctant landlord who might evict you if you miss a payment. You are not a tenant in my house. You are family. And family gets fed. Family gets clothed. Family gets covered. Not because they earned the right to sit at the table, but because the table was built with their name already carved into the wood. Your seat is not borrowed. It is yours. It was yours before you knew it existed, and it will be yours long after every uncertainty you are currently facing has faded into a memory that you will one day reference as proof of my reliability. I want to dismantle the lie that says you have to deserve my provision. This lie has been so deeply embedded in your thinking that you may not even recognize it as a lie anymore. It disguises itself as humility. It sounds like modesty. It whispers things like, "Who am I to expect good things?" And I probably brought this difficulty on myself, and maybe if I had made better choices, I would not be in this position. And while personal responsibility is real and consequences are real, the fundamental nature of my provision is not transactional. I do not provide for you because you have been good enough. I provide for you because you are mine. The same way a parent feeds a child who threw a tantrum at breakfast without withholding dinner as punishment. The same way a shepherd leads a wandering sheep back to green pastures without first demanding an explanation for why it strayed. My goodness is not contingent on your goodness. My supply is not contingent on your behavior. It flows from who I am, not from who you have managed to become. And that means your worst day does not disqualify you from my best provision. Your biggest failure does not subtract from my willingness to supply what you need. The provision was never earned, which means it cannot be lost through underperformance. Now I want to speak to the practical dimension of what lies ahead, because my provision is not only spiritual. It includes the material, the financial, the tangible resources that your daily life requires. There are skills inside you that have not been fully utilized. Abilities I placed within your design that have been dormant because the right environment had not yet appeared. I am opening environments, contexts, where what you carry on the inside will be recognized and valued and compensated at a level that reflects its true worth. You have been undervalued for too long. You have accepted less than what your contribution deserves because you were grateful just to have something, anything, that kept the bills partially covered. And while gratitude is beautiful, it should not be confused with settling. I did not design you to merely survive. I designed you to flourish. And flourishing includes financial breathing room, the freedom to give generously without calculating whether you can afford it, the ability to plan for the future without panic clouding every decision, and the security of knowing that the next unexpected expense will not send your entire world into crisis. I want you to understand something about the way provision moves in the spiritual realm, because it does not travel in straight lines. It zigs and zags. It takes routes that make no sense to the logical mind. It arrives through side doors and back channels and conversations that seemed unrelated until the moment they produced the exact opportunity you needed. This is by design. I route provision through unexpected channels because I am teaching you to trust the provider rather than the method. If the provision always came the same way, through the same paycheck, on the same schedule, through the same employer, you would eventually begin to trust the system rather than the source. And systems fail. Employers downsize, industries shift, economies contract. But the source behind every system is inexhaustible. And when one channel closes, I simply open another. Sometimes the closing of a familiar channel is the very mechanism I use to introduce you to a supply route that carries 10 times the volume of the one you lost. So do not mourn the closed channel. Celebrate the fact that the source behind it is already rerouting toward you through a path you have not yet discovered. I am repositioning you, not just emotionally or spiritually, but practically. The networks you are connected to are about to shift. The information you need to make wise decisions is about to arrive through conversations you did not plan. The courage to pursue the opportunity you have been hesitating over is going to rise inside you, not as recklessness, but as a calm certainty that the ground beneath that step has been tested and found solid. Walk toward it. Do not let the memory of past failures convince you that every new attempt will end the same way. I am doing something new in your life. And new means the old patterns do not apply. The job that did not work out 3 years ago does not predict the outcome of the opportunity appearing now. The business idea that failed before does not mean this one will fail too. I am the God who makes all things new, and that includes the way provision arrives in your specific situation. For some of you, the provision will come through an increase in what already exists, a raise that recognizes the value you have been contributing quietly, a promotion that positions you in a place of greater influence and greater income, a new client who discovers your work and recognizes something in it that others overlooked, a contract that expands beyond its original scope. For others, the provision will come through an entirely new direction, something you have been considering but were afraid to pursue because the risk felt too large and the safety net too thin. I am telling you now, the risk is smaller than you think, because the one managing the outcome is not governed by the same limitations that govern your calculations. And for still others, the provision will come through restoration. Things that were lost will be returned. Opportunities that expired will be renewed in forms you did not anticipate. Relationships that carried financial blessing will be reconnected in ways that honor both parties. I am a God of restoration, and my restoration is never partial. When I restore, I include interest. When I return what was taken, I add to it what was missed during the absence. The enemy stole from you. He manipulated circumstances and poisoned relationships and created obstacles designed to keep you in a permanent state of deficit. But he miscalculated. He did not account for the fact that I keep records of everything that was taken, and I specialize in returns that exceed the original value. Let me also speak to those of you who have been providing for others and wondering when someone would provide for you. The ones who give until there is nothing left in the account. The ones who say yes to every need around them, while their own needs go unaddressed and their own pantries grow thin. I see your generosity, and it has not gone unrecorded. Every sacrifice you made when you could barely afford it, every meal you shared when your own plate was not full, Every financial gift you gave out of a spirit that ached with its own lack, those are seeds. And seeds planted in generous soil produce a harvest that is disproportionate to the size of the seed. Your harvest is approaching. It will not just match your generosity. It will exceed it in ways that will make you laugh with disbelief, because that is the mathematics of my provision. What you give, multiplied by what I multiply, produces a result that your natural mind cannot calculate and your spreadsheet cannot contain. I am speaking over your household right now, over the walls of the place where you live, whether it is a house you own or a room you rent or a space you share with others. I am declaring sufficiency over that dwelling, sufficiency over the kitchen, sufficiency over the closets, sufficiency over every room where need has been living as an unwelcome guest. The food will not run out. The resources will stretch beyond their natural capacity in ways that defy the math, just as they have before. Only this time, you will notice it happening, because I am opening your eyes to see what I have been doing all along. The needs will be met, and they will be met in a way that leaves you with a story to tell. A story about the season when everything looked impossible, and then I moved in a way that could not be explained by human effort or fortunate coincidence. That story is going to become one of the most powerful testimonies of your entire journey, because it will not be about what you accomplished through your own cleverness. It will be about what happened when a child looked at an empty table and a full God and chose to believe that the God was bigger than the emptiness. There is something else I want you to carry forward from this conversation. I want you to begin looking at every person around you as a potential carrier of your provision. Not in a manipulative way, not with the calculating eyes of someone who evaluates relationships based on what they can extract from them, but with the spiritual awareness that I often deliver my supply through human hands. The stranger who holds the door, the acquaintance who mentions an opportunity in passing, the family member who feels a sudden urge to help without knowing why. I move through people. I whisper into their thoughts. I plant desires in their spirits that align with the needs in yours, and the intersection of those two movements creates what the world calls luck or coincidence, but what I call choreography. Divine, intentional, perfectly timed choreography that connects the person who has with the person who needs in a way that blesses both parties. There is a woman I want to remind you about, a widow in ancient times who had nothing left but a handful of flour and a small amount of oil. She was preparing what she believed would be her last meal, the final portion before starvation claimed her and her son. And in that moment of absolute zero, I sent someone to her door. Not a wealthy merchant, not a government official with aid supplies, a prophet, a hungry prophet who asked her for the very thing she could not afford to give, and she gave it. She reached into the bottom of her emptiness and offered what she had, and the jar did not run empty. The oil did not run dry. Day after day, meal after meal, the supply replenished itself from a source that defied every natural law of consumption and scarcity. That story is not ancient history preserved for academic study. That story is a blueprint, a living pattern that I repeat in different forms across different centuries, in different households with different faces, but the same fundamental dynamic. A person at the end of their resources encounters a God with no end to his, and the intersection produces a supply that outlasts the need. You are standing at that same intersection right now. The jar in your life may look nearly empty, But the hand above the jar has no shortage. And I am about to demonstrate that reality in a way that will mark your memory permanently. So stop isolating yourself. I know the shame has made you want to withdraw. I know the embarrassment of needing help has caused you to refuse it when it was offered, to deflect kindness with a quick no thank you that was more about protecting your pride than about genuinely not needing the assistance. Let people help you. Let them participate in the provision I have planned for your life. When you refuse their help, you are not just depriving yourself, you are depriving them of the joy of being used as my instrument. You are interrupting a flow that was designed to bless the giver as much as the receiver. Receiving is not weakness, it is partnership. And I need you to become a better partner in this process. I want to address one more thing before we reach the place of rest. Some of you have been wondering whether I am punishing you through this season of financial pressure. You have searched your memory for the sin, the failure, the wrong turn that might have triggered this season of insufficiency. And you have been living under a cloud of spiritual guilt that makes every shortage feel like evidence of divine displeasure. Let me be clear about this. I am not punishing you. This season is not a consequence of some specific failure you cannot identify. If there were something between us that needed to be addressed, I would address it directly, clearly, and with the tenderness of a father who corrects because he cares, not with the vague, generalized suffering of financial strain. Punishment and provision do not occupy the same space in my character. I do not withhold bread from a child to teach a lesson. I provide the bread and teach the lesson at the same table, because my correction always happens in the context of my care, never instead of it. Your worth in my eyes has nothing to do with the balance in your account. The richest person on earth is no more valuable to me than the poorest, and the poorest is no less loved than the most prosperous. Value in my economy is not measured by accumulation. It is measured by identity. And your identity as my child was established before you earned a single coin or lost a single dollar. Nothing in your financial reality can add to that identity, and nothing can subtract from it. So release the guilt, release the searching, release the spiritual detective work that keeps trying to find the reason for the difficulty, as if discovering the cause would somehow produce the cure. The cause does not matter as much as the response, and the response I am asking for is simple. Look at me. Speak to me. Open your hands and say, I receive what you are sending, even if it arrives differently than I expected. Rest now. Not the rest of giving up, but the rest of settled confidence. The kind of rest that can look at a problem squarely and say, I see you, but I also see the one standing behind you, and he is larger than you will ever be. Lay down the calculations that have been robbing your peace. Release the scenarios that have been stealing your ability to be present with the people who matter most to you. End me the worry. All of it. Every financial fear, every anxious projection, every panicked thought about the future. Place them in my hands and walk away lighter than you came. I am strong enough to hold what you are too tired to carry, and I am willing, more than willing. I have been asking you to let go for longer than you realize. There is a promise I made a long time ago that I want to renew in your hearing. I said that if you seek me first, everything else will be added to you. Not some things, not the spiritual things while you handle the material things on your own. Everything. That word is comprehensive. It includes the rent and the groceries and the tuition and the insurance and the retirement and the vacation you have not been able to take in years, and the birthday gift you wish you could afford for the person you adore. Everything means everything. And the condition attached to that promise is not perfection, it is priority. Seek me first. Make me the foundation rather than the afterthought. Bring the need to me before you bring it to the credit card. Bring the worry to me before you bring it to the sleepless hours. Position me at the center of your financial world, not as a last resort when all other options have failed, but as the first resource, the primary consultant, the senior partner in every decision you make about how resources flow into and out of your life. When I become your first source, every other source aligns under my authority. The job becomes a channel, not the source. The savings account becomes a tool, not the security. The relationships become instruments of my generosity, not replacements for it. Everything finds its proper place when I am in my proper place. And my proper place in your financial world is not the emergency backup. It is the architect of the entire structure. I am your shepherd. You will not be in want. Not because your circumstances will always be comfortable, but because the one leading you through every circumstance has an unlimited supply of everything you could ever require. I go before you into the spaces you have not yet entered, and I prepare them. I prepare the table in the very place where lack used to dine. I fill the cup until it spills over the edges and runs across the surface and soaks into the ground at your feet. And I do it all not out of obligation, but out of a fierce, relentless, unbreakable affection for you that began before you drew your first breath and will continue long after the last star has burned out and the last wave has spent itself on the shore. Receive this, not as a nice idea or a comforting thought for a difficult season. Receive it as a settled reality that reshapes the way you interact with every bill, every budget, every financial decision from this point forward. The provision is real. The promise is real. The provider is real. And he is standing in front of you right now with hands so full that what he is offering is already spilling onto the ground at your feet. Stop looking at the lack. Start looking at the one who holds the supply. Because when your eyes are fixed on me, the need does not disappear, but it does shrink to its proper size. And in the presence of an infinite provider, every need, no matter how overwhelming it feels right now, is finite, manageable, already accounted for, already answered in full before you even knew to ask the question. What you need has already been named. Walk forward, not in fear, not in anxiety, not in the desperate energy of someone who believes everything depends on their own effort. Walk forward in the quiet strength of someone who has been told by their Father that the road ahead has been provisioned, the table ahead has been set, and the only thing left to do is show up with open hands and a willing spirit, and watch what happens when confident expectation meets the faithfulness of a God who has never, not once, in the entire history of creation, failed to keep a promise he made to a child he loves. I am with you. In the bills and the budgets and the hard conversations and the humbling moments and the waiting and the wondering and the raw vulnerability of needing help and not knowing where it will come from. I am with you, and I will be with you in the abundance that is approaching, in the overflow that will replace the shortage, in the moment when you look at a full table and remember the season when it was empty, and you realize that the distance between those two realities was never your effort. It was my faithfulness. It was always my faithfulness, and it will continue to be my faithfulness for every season that stretches out before you, known and unknown, expected and surprising, difficult and beautiful. I am in all of them, providing, sustaining, supplying, building the life I promised you from the very beginning. You are provided for. You have always been provided for. And you will always be provided for. Not because you figured out the system, but because you belong to the one who designed it. And the designer never forgets the names of those who sit at his table. The architect never abandons the building while the construction is still in progress. The shepherd never walks away from the flock while the pasture is still being prepared. And I, the one who began this work in your life, will carry it to completion. Every unfinished chapter will find its resolution. Every unanswered prayer will receive its response. Every empty space will be filled with something that makes the waiting make sense. Not because you performed flawlessly during the season of lack, but because my faithfulness does not depend on your performance. It depends on my character. And my character has been tested by every generation that has ever walked the earth, and it has never once been found deficient. So let this settle deep into the marrow of your understanding. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not a line item on a budget that has already been allocated to someone else. You are the purpose behind the provision, the reason it exists at all. The table was set for you. The supply was measured with your specific needs in mind, and the one serving it has an endless supply of patience, resources, and creative solutions that have no expiration and no limit. Walk in that. Breathe in that. Build your next decision on that foundation, and watch what happens when a child of the living God stops living like an orphan and starts living like the heir they have always been. Amen. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear these words today. Sometimes the people closest to us are carrying financial burdens in silence, afraid to ask for help, afraid to admit that the weight has become too heavy. Let these words reach them. Type Amen in the comments to receive this blessing, and know that the moment you share this message, you are planting a seed of provision into someone else's life that will return to you multiplied. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a word that God has prepared specifically for you.